All right, we're going live.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining. We're going to get started in just a few minutes. This is Extreme Weather Survivors and Mom's Clean Air Force.
Hi.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for joining.
Of course.
Uh, and for those who just joined on, if you want to just, while we're waiting, just drop in the chat sort of, where you're from, if you have any questions for the panelists tonight. All right, so let's go and get started. I'm sure folks will continue to hop on. And I was just texting with Amy. It seems like some of the panelists are actually having some issues with connection. And one of the educators who is participating in the call tonight is actually calling in from participating from Miami. So be having some connectivity issues related to the rain there. And then I know we have folks calling from other places as well. But I just want to thank everyone for joining. Tonight is the second part of our Extreme Heat webinar series. And we're really excited at Extreme Weather Survivors to be partnering again on this effort with Mom's Clean Air Force. We think this is a really important conversation. And we're really excited that you all are able to be here part of it. Want to quickly share a little bit about Extreme Weather Survivors and then a little bit about why we think this conversation here tonight is important. My name is Chris Kocher. Like I said, I'm the co-executive director of Extreme Weather Survivors. We are a new nonprofit that is building a nationwide community of people who have been directly impacted by disasters like wildfires, floods, extreme heat, and other events like the hurricanes that we're seeing last week and then heartbreakingly again this week. And the community that we're building provides a space for survivors to support and learn from one another about what it means to be a survivor of extreme weather disasters, while also empowering those who are interested in advocating to keep these disasters from happening to other families and other communities to support them in those efforts. And we also provide no-cost trauma-informed support programming and have webinars where we bring in experts, subject matter experts like the one that we're doing tonight. And we are really thankful for everyone who is here as part of the conversation tonight. One thing to think about, when we were thinking about this webinar series, the first part we did was back in August. Extreme heat was very much on top of everyone's mind, and we wondered if whether the first week of October was too late. And what we saw this summer in August, we were sort of in the middle of Phoenix was about to hit a record number of 100-degree days in a row. They actually finished. They had I think it was more than I think it was 113 days in a row of 100-degree temperatures or more. And then just on Sunday, Phoenix hit a new daily high, which marked 13 days in a row of record-breaking temperatures. So even in October, which is, I'm in New York, it feels strange to say, but this is something that communities are still dealing with this. And if communities are dealing with this in October, this is a really important, serious conversation that we're having tonight. And I think that will continue in the spring and the summers and the falls in the years to come. The other thing, obviously, that's going on is last week, communities that are very infrequently, if never, impacted by hurricanes. We're impacted by Hurricane Helene, in particular, thinking about Western North Carolina and Northern Georgia. And we know it's one of the deadliest hurricanes on record. And so, our hearts have been with the communities impacted by that. And I'm sure, all the stories and the photos and the images that we're seeing on social media and the news is just heartbreaking. And I think just illustrates how important this work is and how important it is to create spaces like this so that people can learn from one another and learn from the experts about how it means to be someone who is living at this time dealing with extreme weather, and learning from the experts about what it means to be better prepared or as prepared as possible from extreme weather. And the last thing, obviously, is just, we know Hurricane Milton is barreling towards Florida as we're speaking, and we're sort of keeping an eye on that. And just to keep in mind that even as we're doing the conversation tonight is about extreme heat, at the same time, other parts of the country are dealing with other kinds of extreme weather. And this, I think, just illustrates how catastrophic the weather is changing and the impacts that we'll all be dealing with. And so I want to thank everyone for coming together tonight to be part of this conversation. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Amy, who's going to moderate tonight. Thanks, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Good evening, and thank you all for being here. Just an FYI, we are live streaming, and we will have a recording available that we can share the link to afterwards. And as Chris mentioned, I also wanted to just acknowledge that there are a lot of people who are dealing with loss of life and loss of their homes and communities, and we're thinking of them as we talk about this important topic. I live in Texas, and we are hot here too. We're not as hot as some of our neighboring states are, but it is becoming increasingly clear that our hotter weather is going to last longer, at least in Texas and some of the southwestern states. And when we talk to other individuals who live in other parts of the country, they're dealing with it too. I don't think about it as much, but they don't have the infrastructure to deal with the warmer temperatures like we do here. So it's something that all of us can relate to in one way or another. I want to introduce our panelists who are all bringing a level of expertise to our conversation tonight about extreme heat, how it's managed from a public policy perspective, both on a larger scale, but we also want to talk to parents about, now that we understand what the issue is, how can you advocate on behalf of your children in the school system, and also how can children learn to become advocates for themselves in this arena. So I would like to introduce Jennifer Botsford first. She serves as the Bureau Chief of Environmental Health. Jennifer holds a Master's of Science in Public Health from Tulane School of Public Health and Tropical Medicine, and dual bachelor's degrees from the University of Arizona. Jennifer began her tenure at the Arizona Department of Health Services in 2005. Her career progressed through several significant roles, including serving as the State Environmental Health Director, managing the Environmental Toxicology Program, Program Director of the Arizona Biomedical Research Center, and Bureau Chief of Environmental Health Services. Jennifer's oversight extends across numerous environmental health programs and includes strategic planning, policy development, budget administration, and stakeholder partnerships. Jennifer helped lead the collaborative development of the Arizona Department of Health Services recommendations and findings for the Arizona Extreme Heat Preparedness Plan. Thank you, Jennifer, for being here. And I'd like to introduce her colleague, Nikki Lajavardi-Kosh, who is the Climate and Health Program Manager at Arizona Department of Health Services. The Extreme Weather and Public Health Program that she oversees provides resources for individuals, families, and organizations to plan before, during, and after events such as heat wave, wildfire, flood, extreme cold, or poor air quality days. Nikki received her master's in public health from Washington University in St. Louis. Welcome, Nikki. I'd also like to welcome Mary Wagner. Mary Wagner is the Nevada field organizer for Moms Clean Air Force. She's a devoted mother of two beautiful boys and a passionate advocate for clean air and environmental justice. Her journey in advocacy began 2 years ago, driven by her older son's struggle with asthma. Mary is unwavering in her commitment to fighting for clean air and has dedicated her life to this cause. In 2022, Mary began volunteering with Make the Road Nevada after attending an event emphasizing the importance of voting. Inspired by the powerful stories of immigrant panelists from the organization, Mary, a previously undocumented migrant herself, realized the importance of using her voice for social justice. At Make the Road Nevada, Mary honed her skills in grassroots organizing, public speaking, and community engagement. She's worked tirelessly to mobilize communities, raise awareness, and advocate for policies that protect vulnerable populations. Thank you, Mary, for being here. And I'd also like to introduce our fourth panelist, Bertha Vasquez. Bertha taught science for 33 years at GW Carver Middle School in Florida. She is now the education director at the Center for Inquiry and a contributing author of books on evolution and climate change. Her strategies for teaching climate change have been featured in the New York Times and NPR. She is the recipient of several national and local honors, including the 2014 Samsung's $150,000 Solve for Tomorrow contest and the Charles C. Bartlett National Excellence in Environmental Award in 2009. She was Miami-Dade County Public Schools Science Teacher of the Year in 1997, 2008, and 2017. She was also the winner of the NABT's 2017 Evolution Education Award and NCSE's 2023 Friend of Darwin Award. And thank you, Bertha, especially given that you're right in the thick of things. So really appreciate you being here. I know that this is an important topic to you. I kind of would like to start, and I'm going to go around the panel because I think each one of your expertise leads to the next one and the next one. So, Jennifer, I'd like to start with you and talking more globally. What role does public policy play in relieving the health impacts of extreme heat? And what recent measures have you seen be the most effective?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Policy is one of the things that kind of sets the framework and the baseline, and it gives direction to all the different players and agencies and individuals who are involved in that particular work. So it's definitely a key area that, we're fortunate in Arizona that our governor took a pretty big step last year when she got all of our state agencies together to write the first Arizona heat preparedness plan. And that came from record-breaking heat. You heard some of the stats from this year. And last year was another record-breaking year as well. We have last year, I think close to 1,000 people died from heat just in 1 year in our state. And so we know it's something that really needs some attention and some guidance and some coordinated effort. And that's what policy kind of gives us. And so along with the preparedness plan, so the preparedness plan actually focuses on 4 key areas, including shelter, energy, health, and disaster response. And so these are the 4 key sectors that we really need to focus on with heat, because we know that a lot of our vulnerable populations, they're not just vulnerable to the heat, but they're also struggling with other things like maybe housing insecurity or trouble paying for electricity bills or fixing their air conditioner and things like that. So definitely needs to be a coordinated effort from the different players.
And I'm just curious, because I know that there's probably a lot of people watching who are from Arizona and other states in the Southwest. How can other individuals in other states just get a general idea of what their policies are? Do they go to their Department of Health and Human Services, or how would they go about learning more?
Yeah, that's a great question. So their health departments local health department, state health department may have some information on that. Their legislators may be contemplating different pieces of legislation that can go through. So for instance, in Arizona, we had a mobile home park, a piece of legislation that made sure that people who lived in mobile home parks could put up air conditioning in their window units. They were facing kind of pushback from either the owners or the HOAs from being able to have window AC units. So it could be something as simple as that, just working with your legislature. And also nonprofits. So one of the big ones is Red Cross. We're working quite a bit with them this summer as well. So they might have some information specific to your areas. They have local chapters as well. So yeah.
So that's a good segue into my next question about how does your department then coordinate with local communities to provide heat relief during extreme weather events? Because it's one thing to write the policy, and it's another thing to implement it.
Sure. And implementation is tough when it doesn't have, big pockets behind it too, right? And so heat is actually a really good example of how grassroots efforts can really do big things. So in Arizona, we've had lots of different organizations, hundreds of different organizations across the state involved in heat relief since 2005. And because it's grassroots, everybody kind of had a different way of doing it, a lot of different resources, inconsistencies. Like if you're running a cooling center, what are your hours? Who do you accept? Are you, if it's a church, is it wheelchair accessible? Things like that made it a little bit inconsistent. So the user may not know what to expect when they're trying to go find a cooling center, for example. And so this year, we really worked on coordinating that effort. So Maricopa County is our most populous county. They hired a cooling center coordinator. We hired a chief heat officer and a heat relief coordinator. And these three positions get to focus very much on the networking aspect of coordinating these efforts. So our counties actually are the ones providing direct services as well as our nonprofits. So at the state level, we focus really on the coordination efforts and learning more about what resources are needed and going after grants and different funding sources. And then we try our best to support the agencies that are on the ground working with communities.
Great. Along with that, what is your biggest public awareness gap about extreme heat now? And what do you want people to know about extreme heat?
So I would say a couple things are the biggest public health awareness gap. The first is that in Arizona, the majority of people who are dying from heat have lived here for more than 20 years. And that tells me that people are a little bit complacent when it comes to heat. They think they know how to handle it. And then they find themselves in situations where they're starting to experience symptoms. They're maybe not recognizing the symptoms, or they're not able to take protective measures. So going and finding AC, drinking water, doing different things to kind of protect yourself from the heat once you start seeing those symptoms. And so we've been doing a lot of public awareness this summer as well, a lot of public campaigns to try to educate people about the signs and symptoms. And I would say a second gap is really about the energy and the housing costs right now. They're kind of increasing very quickly, and it's hard for some groups to kind of keep up with that. And so making sure that in public health, we're talking to the other sectors as well that can help really and empower families to protect themselves.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I think complacency is something that we're hearing across the board in different areas, depending upon where people are, and just be, we live in it, and we just turn the air up, right? Or if we have that luxury to us. But I hear that. Thank you for that. I wanted to talk to Nikki next, and you and Nikki work together. And Nikki, can you talk a little bit more about the program that you oversee, or the programs that you oversee as an extension of what Jennifer's talking about?
Yeah, so to build off of what Jennifer is saying, a lot of the work we do is with the counties and the universities to better understand how extreme heat is affecting us and what kind of mitigation activities we can put in place to protect people's health, not only from extreme heat, but other weather conditions, as you mentioned earlier. But in regards to extreme heat, we've been doing a lot of work with the counties and the universities to better understand how cooling centers can impact the needs of, or be more, provide the needs that the clientele is looking for.
Great. And what would you say are your program's most significant challenges when addressing extreme heat?
Yeah, so to kind of build off what Jennifer was saying, having the financial and infrastructure resources to help those most in need, cooling centers can be a very effective space to provide heat relief to those who are most vulnerable, like those who are unhoused, elderly, or struggling to pay their bills. These places can have capacity issues during the summer. Oftentimes during peak summer hours, they can become full, or the people who need to get to the cooling centers don't have the means to get there. So having assistance available to get those vulnerable folks to these facilities can also be a challenge. This is something, as Jennifer mentioned, we're working with our partners to try and solve. We try to help expand cooling center networks this year by providing cooltainers, which and putting them in areas where cooling centers are needed. And we've been working with our cooling center administrators to help coordinate efforts between the different sites throughout the states so that all the needs of the communities can be met. And this year we help provide heat relief supplies like water bottles, cooling towels, and electrolyte packets to support those cooling centers. And in addition, to talk more about the infrastructure and financial need, as Jennifer mentioned, we're facing an increasing housing and energy costs, and energy insecurity is a significant issue in Arizona. Energy insecurity refers to the inability to be able to meet basic household energy needs, often due to financial constraints. There was a 2020 study done by the American Council for Energy Efficient Economy, and they found that about 31% of US households experience some form of energy insecurity. And it's likely that these numbers are higher in Arizona due to our intense cooling needs for the summer months. Also, getting public awareness and preparedness information out to the community. We do a lot of outreach, obviously, to different groups, but we're not reaching everyone who needs to hear this message. And then also getting people to continue to take heat warnings seriously throughout the summer, especially in a place like Arizona. Sometimes we'll have last year we had a full month of just excessive heat warnings back to back, and people can kind of become immune to that message. So really making sure people understand that they are at risk and having plans when excessive heat warnings are in effect. And also letting people know that there are some helpful resources out there, like there is the LIHEAP program, which is a low-income home energy assistance program that can help households pay for their heating and cooling bills. Those are just some of the few challenges we face.
Sure, among them, quite a few, I'm sure. How do you work? How does the program work with schools? Do you offer education to parents through the schools and to the educators, or how does that work?
So for schools, we've had a school toolkit that had some fact sheets and puzzles and activity books for kids to learn about heat-related illness, and also for the teachers to learn about it. So that's publicly available. Any school can request that. I think early on there was a bigger effort to send that information out to schools, and then after a certain amount of time, we left it online to be available on demand or as needed. And then in the past couple of years, we worked with CDC and some of our county and university partners to come up with a recommendation list of how schools, based on the different climate zones we have in Arizona, should be taking steps to mitigate the effects of extreme heat, including like what they should do preseason in terms of having shade available, and also what they should be doing on excessive heat warning days in terms of like, okay, at this temperature, it's no longer a good idea to have kids outside. They should be doing some kind of indoor activity. That's a resource that we have promoted to schools and continue to promote through our different communication channels.
Great. Could you, and this might sound like there's no such thing as a dumb question, right? The idea of a cooling center is really interesting to me, and we don't, to my knowledge, we don't have those here. Could you just explain to everyone what a cooling center is and how that works?
Yeah, so a cooling center is essentially a space that a facility such as a church or community organization or a nonprofit organization has put up to allow people to come in and get access to free air conditioning, usually water, and sometimes they can also provide respite centers for people to take rest. And people are allowed to, receive the services for free. And they're usually volunteer-based, at least they are, throughout Arizona here. And as Jennifer said, it's a big grassroots organization.
Great. And along with cooling centers, what other types of community-based initiatives are you all involved in, or that you see that are really helpful in preventing heat-related illness?
Long-term wise, there's been a big effort in trying to improve like shade coverage through other, through our city. So that includes things like tree planting programs. Phoenix has something that's the Tree and Shade Master Program, where they're aiming to increase shade across the city by planting trees in parks, streets, and neighborhoods. Heat warnings, having people sign up for heat warnings has been shown to be effective to get people the information they need to know on what days they should or shouldn't be doing certain activities, and avoiding activities during, peak heat hours. Also, heat education, either going to, like schools or other venues to talk about what are the symptoms of heat-related illness and what steps people should take to prevent those. That's also been shown to be effective in mitigating people's behavior and preventing heat-related illnesses.
Great. So parents then could sign up for these warnings. Do they go out through text or phone, or how does that happen?
Yeah, so they can go through our website and we can give you the link to
Okay.
share with the audience. And they would basically be signing up for a listserv that we use Gov Delivery, so they can sign up for email or text, and then they would get the message whenever there's an excessive heat warning that's been issued by the National Weather Service. And then in that information, we also provide like prevention strategies and other resources that can be helpful for parents to help, navigate through the summer.
Great. Thank you, Nikki. And it sounds like parents could go to, even I saw your website looks great, gives great tips, and parents who live in different areas can still access that, or access their Department of Health and Human Services, their websites for tips and that sort of thing. Thanks, Nikki. I'm going to switch gears. We talked about, what public policies or how our infrastructure works around extreme heat. And I want to take it closer to schools and parents. And Mary, I want to ask you some questions. You work a lot with parents and talking to them and talking to them about effectively advocating for their children. What should parents know about the effects of extreme heat on children and learning in schools? And what are some key steps parents can take to advocate for improved heat safety measures in their schools?
Thank you, Amy. That's a really good question. Extreme heat can make kids feel tired, cranky, sick, and it can also make it really hard for them to focus in school. This is especially true in schools that don't have good air conditioning, insulation, or access to resources. So when kids can't concentrate, they miss out on learning opportunities, which translates to lower grades. And not to mention, it can worsen the health of children with pre-existing conditions like asthma and other respiratory conditions. We often see that children in schools that are in already vulnerable communities are the most impacted by extreme weather. And that's why we need to make sure that all children have the equal opportunity to learn no matter where they go to school at. And as parents, we can get involved in our children's school by attending school meetings, joining the PTO, holding our kids' school districts accountable, and ensuring that they're doing enough to keep classrooms cool. We can also push for our school district to transition to clean energy, like adding solar panels and insulating buildings better so that our children, teachers, and staff can stay cooler. And the good news is that we have laws like the Inflation Reduction Act and the Clean Energy Act that have set aside money for states to help schools to make these changes. This means that schools can upgrade to clean energy, and this helps kids stay cool, safe, while also fighting climate change effects such as extreme heat.
Thank you. Now, I imagine for some parents, they are wondering, well, how do I even start? I mean, how do I start these conversations with school administrators or their teachers? And also, what are some tips if they're feeling like their concerns are dismissed?
That's another really good question. As parents, we do have to speak up to make sure that our children's schools are safe and comfortable for our kids. And as I mentioned before, we can attend school meetings, we can join the PTO or the PTA at your school. You can write to the school district leaders and you can talk to other parents to push for change. And again, thanks to laws like the IRA, there's money available for schools to switch to clean energy, to install better air conditioning, and even use electric school buses, which helps reduce the air pollution. And most importantly, join groups like Moms Clean Air Force and Eco Madres, who are already working in policy with policymakers and advocating for initiatives to address climate change and its effect on our children and our communities.
Thank you. And along with that, parents may not fully understand how our local officials and our policymakers impact protecting our kids from extreme heat. And so there's getting involved in schools, but there's also understanding kind of larger, how does policy making happen and how can parents get involved in that piece?
Yes, it's really important to keep in mind that it's important to vote for leaders from the local level all the way to the federal level, who care about clean energy and protecting our kids from the effects of climate change, such as extreme heat. As parents, we can start by learning what's happening at our kids' school. Do they have working air conditioning? Are they planning to switch to clean energy? Because again, there is money from laws like the Inflation Reduction Act, as mentioned before, to help schools switch to things like solar power, electrifying school buses. Parents can ask school district leaders how they're using those funding and push for more improvements.
Great, thank you. I'm curious because you work as an organizer, so you work with parents probably all the time. Have you seen any successes this type of advocacy, and what were they?
Yeah, so with Moms Clean Air Force, we focus on the implementation of the IRA, which covers a lot of sectors. It covers the clean energy sector. It covers utility accountability. Earlier today, someone was mentioning how it becomes hard for some folks to be able to pay their electric bills. So when we bring parents together and we educate and we mobilize these parents on how extreme weather affects not only our children's health, but also our pockets, and how it also affects their not only their health, but also their learning abilities. You do see parents that get involved. We recently had a utility accountability session not too long ago, and we had parents from all over the city come together and share what their stories are, their personal stories. I think a lot of times as parents, we think that we're going through situations on our own. And sometimes we don't know where to start off at. Personally, I feel like getting close to organizations like Moms Clean Air Force has helped me a lot, because we come together as a community and we all work in different areas, but we kind of all bring the work together. So we're learning how federal policies affect our states, or if there's funding available for our schools, or even for us to make changes in our own home and electrify our home, ensure that we're also insulating our home, because extreme heat is something that doesn't only affect our children at school, but it also affects them when they come home. So if they're having a hard time at school, because of the extreme heat, and then they're coming home and also dealing with extreme heat, we're definitely putting our children in harm's way.
Yeah. You mentioned, of course, Moms Clean Air Force. Are there other organizations too that parents could reach out to and get involved with?
There's so many here in our state. We have Chispa, which is an organization that we work with very closely. We have organization like the CAC that we work with closely as well. And we all, like I mentioned earlier, we all kind of come together. We all do our part. We all try to stay informed and educate each other and mobilize our community so that we can push for these policy changes, both in the federal and local level, as well as keeping our school districts accountable for everything that goes on at school when it comes to addressing extreme weather.
You've mentioned some, and Nikki gave me a really good link, and so I just want to tell everybody that we'll post some of these along with the recording, the link to the recording. So, and Mary, I can touch base with you and get some of those good resources so that we can hand those over to parents. Those are great. Thank you. I'm going to switch gears to Bertha. Bertha, I know that you've been a teacher and an educator, and you're also interested when you and I spoke on the phone, you were talking to me about the curriculum standards for climate change. And I was just curious, what does that mean and what does that look like?
Well, the only state in the country with climate change standards is New Jersey. So one of the questions I get a lot is from teachers is how do I teach climate change if it's not in my standards? Because at this, teachers have a very full plate when it comes to what they have to teach from day to day throughout the year. And so one of the things I try to show teachers and parents too, we could discuss is where does it fit in your curriculum? If climate change isn't in your curriculum, where does teaching it actually fit? And you know what? There's quite a few places. For example, Florida has a standard, how do humans interact with their environment? How do humans impact their environment? Bingo. That's a perfect place where you can talk about climate change. Another one is types of energy and transfer of energy. Well, that's a perfect place too, because you could talk about how turning a copper wire around a magnet produces electricity, that mechanical energy becoming electrical energy. Well, how do you get the copper wire to turn around the magnet? Well, we can boil diesel burn diesel, boil water, get the steam to turn the generator. Or we can use wind energy, or we can use geothermal energy. So you can start teaching climate change and alternative energies in your energy unit. And everybody has an energy unit. Another place that it can be taught is in the water cycle. When you're dealing with extreme heat, for example, you can set up water cycle models in your classroom and then show what happens to the water if it's too hot and the water all evaporates and then you have a drought. So there are definitely places in any curriculum, Arizona, Florida, any state that's not New Jersey, where these types of very important topics can be taught.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought that's kind of shocking to me that it's only in one state, but yeah. When you do teach, I mean, I imagine because I think it can be scary for adults to think about it. When you're teaching children about environmental changes, how can you do that in a hopeful, positive way or in a way that doesn't instill fear?
It's not easy. Actually, I think the NPR thing I was on was how to teach children about climate change without scaring the heck out of them. I think that was the title of the article. I do put on a bit more of a happy face than I feel inside when I teach it. So I think the first thing is to give them language. So especially in the case of extreme heat, it's the little ones, they got to make sure they understand I am thirsty, I am tired, hydration, things like that. Give them the appropriate language. The next thing is to give them agency. I'm going to go ahead in the chat. I'm going to drop a bunch of, we don't have to reinvent the wheel here. There's all of these wonderful organizations that help the youth have agency. Mary mentioned that you guys have some local ones in Arizona. I did in my class, what the most successful project was the second to the last one in the chat. It was called Young Voices for the Planet. A group of students wanted to change the culture of the school. And over the course of a school year, we saved $52,000 in electric bills. And that's by doing things as simple as the windows, weathering, putting weather tape through the windows, the doors. Of course, Florida has a different challenge than you guys have, but we saved so much energy. We saved $52,000. We figured out that if every school in the school district did it, the school district would save $31 million. Several of those kids that were involved in that project went on to environmental careers. So I think it's really important to give them agency. On a easier level, not such a big thing, I would say put them in charge of stuff at home. Put them in charge of a survival kit. Teach them the importance of staying hydrated, wearing light clothes, carrying water, seeking shade, and having them be the person that mentions that in the house. Put them in charge of the pets. Very, very important. If it's too hot outside, make the children mindful of the pets, mindful of their fellow community members. Another way to get them to think about it is through role playing. I think, okay, so you are an elderly person and it is very hot outside. What are some of the things that can be done to get them thinking about being proactive before the heat really affects them? And finally, my favorite, I think, is if you think about the future and the potential innovations that can come our way, and tell these children that, there are careers that nobody here in this panel can even dream of yet that are going to be out there. Um, Possibly they can be part of the solution when they think of the potential, like carbon capture or all the other types of innovations that are out there. Think about telling them, scientists are hard at work trying to figure this out. That's the last way I would try to teach them some optimism in this very difficult time.
Yeah. Well, that really that inspires innovation, when you're talking about that. And my next question really is tied with that. I don't know if you would have anything to expand, but how can teachers use the topic of extreme heat to foster critical thinking and problem solving skills in students?
Yeah. Well, again, it depends on the age group, but I think you can start with the little ones. You could do something as simple as teaching the difference between sunny areas and shady areas. You could even urban islands, like with white paper versus black construction paper, take out that thermometer, have them measure temperature over a 30-minute period of time in the shady area versus the the sunny area. So they have an understanding of what's going on. Another one that's fantastic is a solar oven. We do that in my school every year. All the sixth graders went home and created a solar oven. There's plenty of instructions online to do that. And then they took those prototypes and tweaked them. That's where the critical thinking comes in. The angle's wrong, the size of the box is wrong, the materials are wrong. And they would go back and fix their model, fix their prototype. And that's where the engineering skills and the critical thinking skills come in. Those are just two examples of lots of stuff we did at school.
Well, what I like is, Jennifer and Nikki were talking about programs and communities about building like shade spaces, but are they connecting the dots? And when you're showing children, the way to those things that are being built in communities, I think that's really an important connection that you're making in the schools. I think that's really cool. How can school curricula address climate change and extreme heat in a way that promotes both awareness and action among students?
Well, starting with the same curriculum spots I told you earlier, like energy, water cycle, human impact on the environment. I think studying animals, desert animals, and the adaptations that they have to heat is an excellent way to do that as well. And then again, I think as a teacher, I so welcome the parents that came in and said, I want to help you start the recycling club. I want to help you start the heat awareness club. I want to help you start bring a water bottle to school, water bottle filling station at the school, because teachers are so busy in their classrooms in the day-to-day that type of thing. The only reason it worked at my school as well as it did is because we had the parents behind us. So I would encourage parents to visit their schools and say, I'm here to help. What can I do for you? And I think most teachers, I want to say 99.9% of them are saying, yes, please help me. I would love to see a water fountain station or water bottle filling station or whatever at the school.
Love it. So I want to ask all of you if, because we are going to have parents are watching and they're going to watch the recording. What is it, one takeaway, or if you have like 3 tips for them in helping to keep their kids safe in extreme weather, what would those tips be? And Bertha, I'll start with you.
Well, first of all, I would reassure them about the safety measures that are in place, the safety measures that, for example, Jennifer talked about, so that they know that the adults, including their teachers, their parents, their community leaders, are aware of the extreme heat and they have plans in place to keep everyone safe. Reinforce that they're not alone facing extreme heat, and that there's many people working together to keep everyone safe. I think children need that kind of reassurance. That would be my main tip. And again, if they know the language and they're put in charge of simple things like the heat survival kit of their homes and are the ones that remind everyone else, are the pets inside? Did I bring water? Depending on the age group, of course, that would be helpful.
Yeah, I like that reassurance.
Reassurance is so
Yeah.
important for these kids.
Yeah, yeah. Especially because I think about what's going on in your state right now and just how scary that is for adults. I can only imagine what that's like
Oh
for
my
kids.
goodness. I
Yeah.
thought I was gonna lose. I lost internet twice during this. I popped back in. I don't know if you noticed.
Yes. We were a little worried that you were yeah, in the middle of
Yeah,
it.
and we're not even near the center of this thing, and it's pretty soggy out there. So
Mary, what about you? What is a thing or a couple of tips that you might have for parents?
Yes, I think the biggest one is get involved at your kids' school and ensure that they do have working air conditioning, that they have plenty of water for the kids or water station for the kids, a good plan in place for hot days while also looking for long-term solutions like using clean energy and improving their buildings to keep themselves cooler during school hours.
Love it. Thank you. Jennifer, what about you?
So I would just recommend to make sure kids know how to recognize the signs and symptoms of heat illness. So, when they're starting to get sweaty, they're starting to get really tired, thirsty, those are signs that they're already starting to experience heat-related illness, and then what to do. So at least go get shade. And if that's not working after, 10 minutes, go get it in the AC. And if that's not working, talk to an adult, call 911, just depending on how much those symptoms are progressing. But just make sure that they know what the signs and symptoms are and what they can do about it if they start to experience that.
Thank you. Nikki, what about you?
I feel like everyone already said all the good stuff. But, if I were to add, I would just say, kids don't just listen, they see and learn, right? So just model those behaviors and make it cool. And I also totally agree with Bertha, like giving them the vocabulary, because that's the challenge, right? Like they don't know that they need to ask for these things or how they're feeling. So that's super important as well.
Yeah, and I think about what you were saying, talking about the complacency, and if it's not being transferred to kids, so that's probably a challenge, I would imagine, to some extent. Making sure the adults are aware first of what they need to do. Yes. I'd like to see if there's any questions from anybody who's here.
This is Chris. I'm curious, what would you say, just as, thinking through, we'll be sharing this to our channels and lists. And so, helping get out to the larger audience, and especially just as extreme heat is changing across the country, thinking about younger kids, older kids, what are some things to keep in mind for parents of older kids versus younger kids in talking about extreme heat?
I think that as a parent, one of the biggest things for me was educating myself and learning the language and learning how extreme heat or extreme weather affects our children, as well as how extreme heat even comes to play in climate change and everything that has to do with extreme weather. So educating myself so that I can educate my children. And I think that learning the language was very important for me so that I can teach my children how to express themselves at school. I have a child who is asthmatic, so he easily gets triggered when we have extreme weather here. And so teaching him to advocate for himself when mom is not around has been really important and a really important journey for myself.
Thank you. Anybody else want to add to that? I'm curious if any of you, and I don't know if any of you would have feedback about this, but one of the things that I see here in Texas a lot, sports equals life here, and kids are out in summer either through band or marching band or football, soccer, and we've already had 2 kids, make the headlines with extreme heat where they've been rushed to the hospital. how do we interact with schools and talk to them about those concerns, or are those concerns, or anything for anybody?
I would just stress the importance of having open communication and making sure that, the coaches and the schools understand, like, the risk involved. I mean, I'm sure they get it on some level, right? They know about it, but that it's a concern for the parents, and they want their kids to be active and good at sports and put in the work and do all the things, but they also want them to be safe. And so I think just, making sure that the lines of communication are open and what's important to the parents as they see their kids, engaging in these wonderful activities. Sports is great for our kids. Yeah.
Yep.
I think the days of those coaches that made the kids run around for 5 hours without drinking any water, I want to believe that those days are over, that coaches are much more aware now of the importance of hydration and things like that. So hopefully that's under control.
I do think it's improved, and I think that too they've changed some of the practice times to, really super early or later when the sun's starting to go down. So I think they've made some of those alterations, but that's always a concern when I'm driving by a school, seeing them out there.
I'm curious from a perspective of, understanding that sometimes these conversations that are anchored in public health, sometimes politics can be brought into it in a way that is not always, productive or welcome or helpful or anything like that. But I'm just curious, and particularly Mary, but others, do you see politics or coming into these conversations? And I know trying to keep it anchored in public health and safety and keeping kids safe, I think that's a really powerful framework to have these conversations. And I'm just curious if you've seen politics being brought into it, and if so, if you have some tips for people around language that can be most helpful in talking with people who may not see eye to you on, the IRA or any of these other more solution-oriented climate things that we all obviously care about.
I have I know Mary, he asked you, but
Yeah, for anyone though, anyone.
my strategy was everybody likes money. Some of us hug the trees, but everybody likes the money. And the $52,000 that we saved at my school, I didn't care about the money, but it was about teaching kids about climate change and the dangers of climate change and the potential solutions for climate change. So when I encounter someone that doesn't think it's happening, I was like, what's the worst thing that can possibly happen? Hey, we can save the school district $31 million. Or hey, we can save the state, I don't know how many millions of dollars in relief or whatever. So money's always a good place to go, because what's the worst thing that can happen? We could build a better world.
I was waiting to see if someone else was going to respond, but yes, I think politics plays a huge role in addressing climate change and its effect in our communities and our children. I think that educating and mobilizing our community is also very important, so that as parents, we understand how these policies affect our children or the future of our children, as well as what we can do as parents to get involved so that we can push for policies that are going to address these issues and that is going to work for a more sustainable future for our children. And luckily for us here in Nevada, we have amazing representatives that have fought so hard to ensure that our state has funding, like the IRA, and it has progressed and it has better our state, and it's only continuing to better our state. We have a new round of funding for electric school buses in our state. So we're working really hard to see how we can work with our local district to ensure that they're also applying, because even if policymakers do work really hard to ensure that we do have funding in our state, if our districts are not applying for these fundings that are available for them, it kind of just unbalances itself. So just educating and mobilizing our community to ensure that we understand how policymakers can either help or hinder our state, and how local leaders can also do something about, in this case, school districts apply for these fundings that are available for our state.
Thank you both. We're about to wrap up on our hour, but I did want to give Bertha, I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about your book and what the title is, what it's about, and when it's being published.
Sure. I checked today if there was a pre-order link available, but it's not. But it's called What Teachers Know and Want to Know About Climate Change. And we crowdsourced a bunch of questions all across the country. We asked teachers to ask questions about climate change, like how do you teach climate change in a climate, no pun intended, of political angst. We asked teachers to send in success stories, because again, I think that's a really positive way to talk to our own children, is other success stories, other people's success stories. We asked them to send in tips, what they've done in their schools. So the chapters are laid out, but interspersed among the chapters are all these questions, tips, success stories, which makes it much more interesting. We address the standards, we address the misconceptions, the history of climate science, and we are also addressing, for the first time, I think teachers are not used to talking about that. What if facts don't matter? I think a lot of times when you talk to someone who doesn't accept science, climate change, you follow what's called the information deficit model. You think, oh, I'm just going to show them the hockey stick graph and I'm going to show them the temperatures, and they're going to understand. No, facts don't really change minds. So you have to think about how your identity, your biases, your personal experiences affect what you believe in, and how to talk to somebody who perhaps doesn't share the same belief system that you have when it comes to climate change. And that is addressed in the book as well.
That's great. Well, thank you all so much for being with us and for answering these questions and giving me some resources that I can share too with our audience. I'll compile those and get those posted on our Facebook page. And I'm sure, Chris, there's other places we could post them as well. But
yeah, well, I just want to just thank everyone for joining. I just want to especially I really appreciate Bertha that framework of giving people those practical tips, those positive stories. I think I'm of the just show them the chart and why isn't that enough? And I think really as activists, like, we owe it to the communities and the movement that we care about to really think about what is persuasive, who our audience is, what motivates them, what moves them, what they care about, and really framing the things that we care about in terms that relate to the issues that they care about. And there are so many things that are across, that share that commonality. And I think, just thinking again about, as we're sitting in this moment between a hurricane that was one of the deadliest in recent years last week, and a hurricane that, intensified from, I think I was reading, from 60 to 160 miles in 28 hours. We're entering really into new territory with how quickly storms are intensifying, how deadly the impacts are, and just how where those impacts are happening are changing, even from month to month, it seems, but certainly from year to year. And so I think really keeping in mind that the way that we achieve the future that we want is by keeping that framework in mind and thinking about how we can reach and connect and build in anchoring our facts and figures and charts into shared values. And that's, I think, really where we will have success in building a movement that brings the change that we want to see. And I want to thank everyone for being such a leading part of that. Like I said, Extreme Weather Survivors is a fairly new nonprofit. And so we really are so thankful to be here in this space with all of you who have been leaders in this movement for so many years, experts in this space, and really working together to take that expertise and learning to more and more communities who are, unfortunately and heartbreakingly, will be facing that reality in the years to come. And just a special thanks again to Moms Clean Air Force and Eco Madres. You can check out their website, momscleanairforce.org. I just want to thank you all for all the work that you're doing to make a difference in your homes, your schools, your communities. If you have been directly impacted by extreme weather, and you want to connect to extreme weather survivors, you can do that at extremeweathersurvivors.org. And thank you all for joining tonight. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Have a good night.